Well, welcome back to the channel, guys. Old Blue Accord here again. And today we want to talk about the 88 Honda Accord in the front suspension. There's something called radius rods. And the radius rods are an important part of the front suspension. You look right here on this, what I'll do is I'll flash this drawing to you. This is straight out of the book. As you can see, the radius rod, and then it has some bushings that go to your front of your suspension assembly, and then they go back to the lower control arm. So what happens with these bushings, and they're just a rubber, box stock again from the factory. They're just kind of like a really soft, and this one, as you can see, is totally wore out, but they're very soft bushing. So don't think after 30 years you're going to have a stock bushing in there. What they've done now is they've actually upgraded the durometer, the hardness of the rubber on these bushings. So sometimes you might see them called the upgraded bushing or new and improved. All they've done is taking the same exact bushing and made it harder. So as you can see, it's very hard to squeeze this one. But if you take one, let's see, we found the stock one. There's a stock one. Yeah, stock, right? It's a lot easier to manipulate it. Now, obviously the sleeve's in here, but I can't even turn this little ear. Where on this one, it's pretty easy. Another thing too is that you can see on these, the sleeve wears out. That is actually, I believe, the original. So what happens is that metal rod goes through there and you have two nuts. The rod is trying to go like this inside this, and the bushing is taking up that flex. So it's in a bind. So in a lot of OEM suspensions, there's always some kind of compromise. And when you look at the design or you watch the suspension move, you'll kind of understand. But that's just the best they can do with what they have. And you just have to kind of live with it and understand that this bushing needs to be replaced. The other thing is the nuts that go on this to hold this on, they come loose all the time. And this is like one of my top 5 things to check on this car is the nuts get loose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down below and show you the nuts and the subframe and everything, and where you should be tightening that. Now, what you'll find and how you know that your bushing's either worn out or the nuts have come loose is you won't really notice it too much driving unless you're in the higher gears, especially with a standard trans, a manual trans. If you go from like 4th to 5th and you put the clutch in, the car's going to have a tendency to, it's almost like it wants to walk away from you, and then as soon as you put it back in the gear, it tightens back up. It's a hard thing to explain, but it is quite pronounced. It's not like the steering wheel is getting jerked out of your hand. It's just like the car wants to kind of just walk on its own. So you'll put the clutch in, the switch gears, and the car will do this, and then as soon as you put pressure back on it in gear, it straightens right back up. That's really the only best way I can explain it. I've had this car 255,000 miles, I guess. I've had to tighten the nuts down below and or change these bushings probably at least 4 times. Now, I'm on my second set of new and improved bushings, but then as you can see, the sleeve still wears out. I was looking for, this is a new one. I was trying to find one. I'm pretty sure this is one of them where the sleeve starts to just oblong. So even though everything's tight, the nut's tight up against there, you're still having a wear thing. So that's kind of important to understand that this bushing and the sleeve have a lot to do with how this is set up. So here's a new one, as you can see. And then you want the thicker bushing to the front. Now, in fact, I think they're labeled front and rear, so they go in like this towards the front of the car. I did put them in one side in wrong by not paying attention to it, so they're actually a different And I did this right up on 3Gs, of course, so with pictures and everything, and I'll put this video up obviously as well. But anyway, you want the durometer nice and hard. This one, if I remember right, was probably like the box stock Honda, where the aftermarket ones, and I bought mine at O'Reilly for 30 bucks. I think TRW's got a set. Just about all the majors have the same thing. Moog might call it new and improved, but it's gonna be like this. I mean, it's gonna be absolutely rock hard. You can't squeeze that, and actually that's what you want. The fix for this obviously is to move the arm and get it in less than a bind and have more length. If you had the radius rod longer, you'd have less of a bind, but it's just not physically possible in this car. So it's always suspensions are a compromise, and this is a good suspension, but this little part here, box stock or otherwise, you need to always check. Like I said, it's probably on my top 5 list of things to check if you buy a car like this. I hate to say new because they're used, but I think y'all know what I mean. You buy it and it's new to you. This is like the first or second or third thing I would check. It can be dangerous. You're not going to totally lose control, but the movement of the car is not going to be natural, and you're not going to like the feel of it, and that's probably the most important thing. And your bushings are probably going to end up looking like this. So I'm going to stop it here, and I'm going to reposition the camera down below. I'm on the hood of the car right now just to do the talk. And another cool thing about the radius rods, and we'll look down below, is you can adjust your caster with them. They're threaded. Now, a lot of other types of suspensions, Chrysler uses what they would call, I believe it's a tension rod, the modern Chrysler LX. And then the older torsion bars have, they call it a strut rod. And then you have to actually buy an aftermarket rod that's threaded so you can adjust your caster a little bit by pulling that lower control arm back and forth. So it's kind of cool that this has it in there. A lot of places that do alignments probably don't realize that's adjustable, or if they do, they don't want to mess with it. But it's kind of a cool thing to understand. And of course, if you look at my other videos, currently my caster's negative, and you always want positive in this case. So I need to have it adjusted. Now we'll see what happens with that. It'd be pretty interesting. But all right, I'm going to pause it here, and I'm going to reposition the camera and then jump back into the underneath part. But check your bushings and torque the nuts. We'll go down there and take a look at everything. Okay, so we're going to jump right back into the underneath of the car. And again, this is the front. And I'm going to just do a handheld on this one because there's going to be a lot of movement, so I apologize. And I'm also going to move the light around. So there's the front nut. And as you can see, it's supposed to be either a nylock nut, or I don't know what the Honda factory calls it, but it's supposed to be a nut that doesn't loosen. Now, I've had these loosen a lot on me. And in fact, most of the times I double nut them. So that means I torque the nut to what it's supposed to be, and I believe they call for 40 foot-pounds. No, I'm sorry, they call for 32. So not that much, again, because you have a metal sleeve in there, so you don't want to crush anything. And that has to move a little bit. That's why that rubber bushing is there. You're buried in this subframe, right? So you have a bush on one side, a bush on the other. I'll use the English term instead of bushing. And then you're sandwiched into the back here, right? So by tightening that nut, you're squeezing everything together in here. Now, if you look back at this rod, and that's a good angle right there, as you can see, it's going right back to the lower control arm. And again, these are 40. There's no bushing in here. It's metal to metal. That'll cause some kind of odd, you'll have these little groans, or kind of, not really a high-pitched squeak. It'll be like a low groan sometimes when you take off. Tighten these up. And these, I go more than 40 on these a lot of times. A little dirt gets in between the two metal meeting spots. You can see there's already a little corrosion there. and it'll just make a little funny groaning noise, like maybe right as you first take off. It's kind of annoying. It took me a long time to figure that out. Yeah, they don't take Loctite or anything like that, but you want them pretty tight. So again, the radius rod goes back to your lower control arm. Your lower control arm goes back to this mount here, and then to the ball joint. So see, you're kind of making like a triangle. It's a little bit hard to catch the angle, but this rod is, the way it's bushed, it is in a little bit of what I would call a bind. So as your suspension is dropping, you're fighting this bushing all the time, and you really have to. The way that this is designed, that's really the only way OEM that they could do that. Yeah, there's some aftermarket, there's some aftermarket rods, I believe, probably not for our car, where they use like a spherical bearing or a misalignment, really not a bushing, but a metal, two metal ball and cups that allow that to move without being in a rubber bind. So it's just part of the suspension you kind of have to deal with. And it makes it, car handles good, but you have to make sure, like, again, this nut has to be tight, and your bushings have to be in good shape, not crushed. And then again, you can see here, I get the backlight good. Yeah, you see you're adjustable. You can unscrew this, take this jam off, and then you're threaded. And then what I want to do, since right now I have negative caster, my ball joint should be towards the back of the car. I would want to pull the lower control arm up. And it tells you in the book, I think one turns like 0.8 degrees, I'm going to say, by thread. So I have quite a bit of thread. Now the weird thing is I don't remember ever really messing with these, so I'm kind of curious where I've kind of lost my caster, but I don't know, that's to be determined. Now I do have a solid bushing here. I've had one for a long time. I don't think this is the issue. I went ahead and made solid bushings here, and then here again for where the shock. And again, I use that baked nylon. It's very hard, and it wears really well, as you can tell in my other videos. So yeah, I've got a bushing there and there. It's possible the frame's bent. You don't have a lot of metal there. It's like tin to me, but you can see the thickness. Even right here, not very thick. So it's possible over time something in the rear sub has been bent. You can bend these rods. I've seen people, you'll hop over a curb and land right on top of this, and it'll get bent. It's not that common, but you buy an older car and you don't know what's happened to it. You're gonna see some funny things. So it doesn't hurt to look. Now, as far as finding new ones, I actually tried to buy a set just for this video, just to kind of, it'd be easier to show you than taking the whole car apart. That didn't happen. I can't find a set right now, so it's going to be a junkyard thing. I'm sure they're out there new some places, just I haven't been able to find them lately. So, and that's pretty much going to be, so your radius rod bushes, that's pretty much going to be the video, but definitely on my top 5 list of suspension things to check. And it's pretty easy. It's just a 17 millimeter nut right there, and again, extension, and just put a little torque to them. Don't go crazy. Like I said, it's 32 foot-pounds. It's not probably dead critical. You could go just a little bit more, but they need to be tight, and they have a tendency to loosen just the way the suspension runs and binds. And that's really my only tip for that. Trying to see if I can get, it's kind of hard to see the triangle. Yeah, that's good right there. So if you look at that, you can see you're trying to make a triangle through those 2 points. And that's how the suspension works. So I appreciate y'all looking. If you have any questions, feel free. But definitely, the newer bushings are nicer, are just a nicer thing. The durometer's a lot harder. They're going to last a lot longer than the regular rubber. And you're going to be a much happier person the way it drives, trust me. Especially once you do it, even tighten up the nuts, it'll be night and day difference. But Old Blue Accord, I want to thank y'all for, I also want, I forgot I need to give a shout out to Shane 86 and Refried. Shane for doing his turbo motor. and Refried for doing a great job with his autocross. He really flew this weekend, so I want to give a shout out to those guys too. But appreciate y'all looking, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again. Old Blue Accord out.